Hello and welcome to Telegraph Studio and Business Reporter's Performance Improvement Campaign, hosted by the Telegraph Online. I'm Alistair Greener, and today we're talking to Ben Mendoza and Mark Bellingham from MDSL about why it's important to understand the total cost of technology services to an organisation. Good morning.
Morning.
When it comes to technology services, where are organisations typically going wrong today?
Enterprise companies are spending more than they should on technology services. Procurement departments lack clarity and control once the procurement has been made. They're very diligent in driving down price and negotiating rate plans and so on for services at the time, but once they're deployed, they lose sight of how they're being used and the usage patterns. Many enterprises fall in love with new technologies and are quick to deploy them, but don't really understand or don't really know how those usage patterns are going to be in the future. So fortunately, there is a really good way in which you can apply other technology to manage that and involve best practices.
You talked there about clarity and the fact that organisations are normally very diligent in the procurement process. So what's going wrong?
As Ben says, they're really lacking the clarity and control to make informed decisions. It's not really enough to negotiate a good price and expect a good outcome for the business. The lack of ongoing management can often mean that there are no controls in place to be able to check that the negotiated rates are actually filtering through to the supplier's invoices, and just a general lack of understanding about what they're spending and where they're spending it and how those services are being used in the enterprise really puts a lot of enterprises at a disadvantage when they come to negotiate new contracts. So that clarity and that control is really a key part of being able to negotiate the best possible contracts for your business, both on price and on service.
Okay, I get the theory, but could you maybe give us some examples of how that actually manifests itself?
Well, let's take the Telegraph as an example. Let's assume you're paying, say, £10 million a year on telecom services. It probably should be 9.
Wow, that's an extra £1 million. I mean, how can that be?
Well, every customer that we meet has services that they are just not using that they're paying for. And all of the customers have a significant number of services which are being billed incorrectly because they negotiate a particular rate, but what is actually sent to them in the bill can be very different. And they need to have the methodology of being able to check that very accurately. Similarly, companies are very dynamic. They open offices and they close offices and they leave services behind when they move and still are being charged for them. When users leave organisations, they take phones with them. People don't have the rigour to close down the ADSL lines that they were using at home and so on. So there are many ways in which these services cost a lot of money and build up to be easily 10% of the overall bill.
And have you actually worked with organisations where you've been able to save these kinds of money?
Yes, absolutely. We have a company who had a project that was set up to call the speaking clock every 3 minutes and leave that running for 45 seconds. And they tested the project, but then forgot to switch it off. So a year later, they'd spent £15,000 on that service alone. So these sort of things are happening with projects that are going on all the time. So there are many experiences of where we found enormous savings for our companies.
Wow, I hope they were on time for every meeting after that.
Yeah, we'd hope so.
But seriously, there's a science behind all of this. So can you talk us through how that actually works?
The science really involves a combination of sophisticated software that drives best practice and also a complement of staff that are dedicated industry experts. What we do is we tailor our solution so that we have a very good understanding about each of the individual organisations that we're serving, what their geographical footprint is, what their organisational structure is, and we do that before we allocate any of their assets to those various areas. So then what we do is we build out an independent inventory of all of their technology assets and services, all of the contracts and with the rate cards that they negotiated, and we do it at a very granular level of detail so that we can forensically check the invoices that come in and compare it to the inventory that we have. One of the key challenges around that process is really keeping on top of changes. And what we have is a portal that allows our customers to come in and request changes, new services, cancellations, existing changes. And what that does is, after the authorization and implementation of those services, it will automatically update the inventory in a single platform, so that you have a very good understanding, a very good confidence level in the data that you're holding, because the changes are happening in real time. And it's that procurement process that's really driving that inventory and putting you in that good position to check those supplier invoices coming in.
You talked there about looking at everything on a granular level, talking about forensic checking. That all implies that this process takes rather a long time. How long does it take?
Well, of course, it does depend on the size and geographical diversity of the organisations. We have companies that are in 60, 70, 80 countries, and those sorts of projects will take possibly a year or 2 years to roll out in completion. But most companies are in a position where we can attack the low-hanging fruit, if you like, the easy opportunities, and find significant return on investment within 6 months. The sooner you start doing this, the sooner you're saving that money. So it doesn't take that long to see a real return on the investment of these sort of projects.
And you've talked here about a different way of managing procurement, of checking, and new methodologies. So where do you see this going? What's the future? What are the trends that we should be looking out for?
Well, there is a trend towards outsourcing more of this sort of technology. What's happening in the marketplace is there are more and more uses for wireless technology. More and more machines are being connected. In the future, there'll be more wireless connections for machines than there will be for people. And so we're seeing that the costs around that need to be managed very carefully too. So it's great to plug all your vending machines in and put SIM cards in them so they can report back when they need a refill, and this, which is fabulous. What we want to be able to do is make sure we're checking the usage on those plans, that there's no overage charges, and that somebody hasn't stolen the SIM card and is now voting on X factor with it, because we've seen that sort of thing before. But automation is really going to be big as we move forward. There are less staff within organisations that are able to spend the time doing this as this grows so big. And so we need to be able to automate things like adding roaming to your mobile when you travel abroad. Why should you have to remember to do that? We should be able to detect this is where you are and switch that sort of facility on automatically within the software. Those sorts of things we can do already. So that's the future.
You've given us a great insight how we can manage our technology costs, and it's been really fascinating finding out more. Ben Mendoza, Mark Bellingham from MDSL, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.